A couple episodes ago, we talked about, finding the agency that's the right fit for you, what companies can do. Um, you know, are there any tells where a company could pick up on like that the agency doesn't have their best interest in mind? Like, are there any things that are like, okay, yeah, there's something I'm seeing here that doesn't feel right? Like, are there any things that come to mind that would be tells that the agency is more worried about something else other than a client's best interest?
Am I getting a highly curated experience from me, or am I getting a templated copy paste approach? That's the easiest way to tell. Agencies that don't have your best interests in mind, they've created efficiencies by creating a production line. So are you getting a template? And we've seen this. I we've seen this with companies where it's a template and they copy and paste, and oops, we forgot to remove all of the references from the last client we copied and pasted this for. So if you're getting a templatized approach, if you're just part of an assembly line, your best they don't have your best interest in mind. They're doing that because it increases their margins, it makes them more money. If you have high turnover on your account, they don't have your best interest in mind. So if your delivery team is constantly shuffling with people, what that typically is indicative of is they're trying to find the optimal mix of people that can get the job done at the lowest cost to them. So their agencies are constantly playing around with staffing to have that balance of let's just what's the bare minimum we need to do to get the job done at the lowest possible employee cost. So if you're seeing lots of volatility in your delivery team, it's also a telltale sign that they have their best interest prioritized over yours. If you're getting Again, if you're getting pushed very heavily to buy a specific product, and as part of that, they're throwing under the bus and talking incredibly negative about the competitors of that product, it's also a telltale sign. If we're having really productive conversations and we're talking about pros and cons in a very open, honest way, that's one thing. That's one thing. But if I'm coming to you and saying, well, vendor 𝐴𝐵𝐲, they're the best and everyone else sucks. Like they literally suck. And here's how they suck. I mean, you got to just do this. Just do this. It's a sign that they have their interest prioritized over yours. And finally, and this is kind of the used car technique. If there's any kind of pressure tactics to do anything, to add services, to add something, to add a product, to do this or that, if you're getting the high pressure of, well, we need to do this now, the clock is ticking, this is going to expire, it's a sign that they had we have to get this deal done now for us this quarter. So our interests are definitely more important than your interests. So I'm sure there's a lot of others, but those are the most common signs that you can look out for if you're looking for an agency. One other one I'll throw in there, because it's very popular in mid-size agencies, is if you see bait and switch happening, it's
Ooh, that's a good one.
absolutely a sign that their best interests are put ahead of yours. And if you're not familiar with what this looks like in the agency space, mid-size agencies have this down to a science, in which they will hire a handful of incredibly high profile, very, very talented, high-end people. And they will kind of roll them out as the face of the company, attract business, help in closing sales deals, because, hey, I want to work with this person. I've heard about them. They've been around for a long time. They're amazing. I think they can really transform the way we think about how we do business. But then they're not on the accounts. They may be on the account by name, but they're not there. And so what happens is they use these very influential, high profile people to attract business and also to justify a very high hourly rate. And then they staff the project with a bunch of kids that just graduated college a year ago that they're paying dirt cheap. And so you can see that margin growing and growing and growing. Whose best interest is in mind there? So that's another big one, especially if you're talking to mid-sized agencies. We don't see that as much with the big players like the Ernst & Youngs and the Sapiens, and that we don't see that happening at that level, they have a different play. But in that mid-size space, like 50 to 200 consultants, oh yeah, those guys have got that down to a science where they will dangle the really high-end principal consultant that has written all the books on the topic, but they're never going to be on your account.
Mhm. Yeah, I didn't even think of of bait and switch, even though I've actually seen it happen. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they show up to the first couple discovery calls, and I mean that happened. I could Now that you're saying that, I could think back to a couple of cases 10, 12 years ago where you had that person on those first couple calls and then they quickly drop off and it's deferring to someone else. And you come to realize later what was going on. I would like to add something else, and I don't want to harp too much on the reseller program, but one thing that I've seen that is a tell that the the agency has their own vested interest in selling you something is if they're pushing you to a particular solution, a particular project, if they won't give you any kind of referrals. Most
Mm,
agencies, when they've got great relationships with clients, they have clients that are willing to be referrals. They're willing to jump on the phone for 30 minutes and talk to a prospect and be honest with them. And those agencies are more than happy to connect a prospect with clients. So if they're not going to give a referral, and then if you ask any details, and I've done this recently with another agency, and I wasn't trying to create a turf war or a pissing contest, but they're pushing something that I am pretty certain doesn't work. And I said, like, could you just give us some details on other clients that you've onboarded this to? How did the projects go? What was the duration? What was the ultimate LOE of the project? Because you're telling us this is fairly simple. And instead of giving us any of like their branded material, any kind of things that they wrote about the projects, the solution that they're pitching, they gave generic vendor materials,
yeah.
materials right from the vendor. And I'm like, you don't understand how transparent you're being in your end goals, not how valuable this is going to be to the client.